Welcome to Sales Players, the #1 podcast for top players in B2B sales.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the world of sales, this is the show for you.
We're all about bringing you fresh, actionable ideas to supercharge your rev gen game.
We dive deep into the mindset, habits, and tools used by top performers in the industry. Generate more leads, close more deals, and build wealth and financial security in B2B sales.
So if you're ready to level up, you've come to the right place. Join the conversation with other like-minded sales players and continue the discussion beyond the show.
Hit the subscribe button, tune into the Sales Players, and let's start winning together.
This episode is sponsored by Accord. Accord helps revenue teams drive execution excellence by enforcing their standards for how they sell, onboard, and expand with prospects and customers. Revenue teams can ensure flawless execution of value selling, medpick, account planning, business cases, mutual action plans, and more with Accord's deal execution platform. If you've been a long-time listener of the show, you've probably already heard me talk about how I use mutual action plans, account plans, and business cases to manage and close my enterprise deals. Well, Accord has created a better way to manage the process. They're your solution for deal execution. Your buyers are going to love it because it makes their evaluation process so much easier by helping them seamlessly validate and onboard new and existing vendor partners. I've been super excited to be using Accord to manage my 6- and 7-figure enterprise deals. So for sales players looking to get started with Accord for free, use the link in the show notes to sign up today.
Hey Sales Players, before we dive back into the conversation, I wanted to introduce you to a game changer in the lead generation tool arena, and it's called Lead Feeder. Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, tracking their behavior in real time, seamlessly integrating this data in your CRM. Lead Feeder is not just a tool, it's your secret weapon for efficient and targeted lead engagement. What sets Lead Feeder apart is its ability to provide detailed insights into visitor behavior, helping your sales team to prioritize efforts and close deals faster. Ready to revolutionize your approach to leads and deals? Head over to leadfeeder.com for your free demo today. That's LEADFEEDER.com. Don't miss out on the future of successful lead generation with Lead Feeder. Plus, if you go to the show notes, we actually have a special link that will give you a 21-day free trial instead of the normal 14-day free trial. Go over today and sign up.
We are live today. We've got Ross Rich joining us. Ross, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yes, not to be confused with Rick Ross, who we were just talking about.
Oh, we're going to talk about Rick Ross. We might talk about a few others.
Well, I think a good starting point for our listeners, we know who you are. We've been following you on socials for a while, and we're, of course, familiar with Accord. But maybe tell our fans and listeners a little bit about where you got your start, how you got into this crazy business we call sales, specifically tech sales, and then we can go into how you got the idea for Accord.
Totally. Well, it does all start with the music industry. Speaking of Rick Ross, I was actually working at Columbia Records, starting off my career. I was managing artists, putting on tours and events, etc. when I was in university. And the dream job was to get, a gig in LA or New York at Columbia, and ended up there. And honestly, it was very different than what I was expecting. I was honestly super bureaucratic for being in the creative space, and very different than what it was like working with these individual artists, putting them on tour, helping record demo albums and trying to get them signed. It was like working at a bank, and it was just kind of copy paste. Here's this artist. This is how we're going to, work with Spotify, Apple Music, radio, etc. And it's like, you know what? I think I want to go back to something that's entrepreneurial, but where I can, learn what great looks like at a company. And my brother, who's now one of our co-founders at Accord, moved to San Francisco and got a great job as kind of the first seller at a company. And that really spoke to me as being able to use what I was good at to contribute to something, very, entrepreneurial and flexible. And so I kind of got started there, joined at Stripe, and the rest is kind of history from there.
So were you pretty early at Stripe?
Yeah, I was one of the first sellers there when the founders, John and Patrick, had the crazy idea to actually talk to customers for the first time. It was, they built an incredible product. But it was pure self-serve API docs on the website, and go off and build the thing and do it. We didn't have a CRM. The first head of sales was routing tickets from user voice, which is like pre-Zendesk. And it was like, here are your accounts from inbound lead queue. It might be a support ticket. It might be a sales opportunity. Who knows? Go off and try to do the thing. And yeah, it was just an amazing opportunity to get a ton of at-bats with a great product. And we had one of the top AEs there for, 16 quarters in a row, and just absolutely fell in love with sales and kind of the art of selling and the science of, kind of scaling go-to-market teams.
I want to talk a little bit about that, because one of the questions that we hear from our fans and listeners a lot is, how do I get plugged into opportunities for the next Stripe? It's a really, it's a big question, and I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have the answer. A lot of it is playing a little bit of roulette, right? Maybe when you joined Stripe, it didn't seem like it was going to someday become like the gorilla in the digital payment space for what Stripe does best. Such a well-known brand. Mm-hmm. But were there any signals, I guess? How did your brother get plugged into it? I have so many questions that I think our listeners would want to hear on just how they can find their next opportunity. And maybe that next opportunity is Accord, by the way, and people should join Accord. So yeah, tell us about that.
I appreciate the plug. But yeah, honestly, I was very early in my career. It wasn't as thoughtful and rational as I would like to maybe tell in hindsight. But the one thing that steered me in the direction, so maybe zooming out, don't get so focused on, hey, I need to stay in, the go-to-market tech space or CX or fintech or something. I applied to 45 different companies.
Wow.
At a variety of different roles that I thought I might be a fit in. And starting when you're looking for a new gig and zooming out, I think is really helpful. I think you get so many data points from all those conversations with recruiters, with the people that you might work with. That's going to really help give you that intuition around what is the right fit. And then I actually moved to SF from New York without a job. I had 8 on-sites from those 45 first calls. I'd never done sales before, so I didn't know what to say on these calls. But by the end of it, classic, you get down your talk track and how do you describe yourself and how do you describe what you're interested in? That just comes from repetition. So luckily I had that and had the 8 on-sites. And honestly, Stripe by far just had the most talented, smart, hungry, but humble people. And that really spoke to me as a group of folks that I wanted to work with. And weird enough, it was like everyone took like a demotion to work there. It was like, here's some like director, whatever person who's like now in IC here. Here's this VP that's like willing to do this job because they know that, this is the place they want to be at. And that's honestly why I ended up taking the job there versus the handful of others that, had higher paying roles at. I was like, if any of these people are willing to take this job here, this is where I should be. And I think, again, like you don't get that signal unless you're willing to put yourself out there and start wide and narrowing it from there. So that's the only reason I ended up there. Just the vibe of the people and the interviews were just like, you're fantastic humans. And this is where, I'd love to work.
That's really cool. That's a super kudos to you at that age for recognizing that. I think a lot of us miss that energy, or we don't know how to identify it, especially early on in our career. So really cool that like you were able to spot that. And that was sort of a driver to stick around and ride it out.
Pure luck though, because if I had a background there, I could have been more focused. I could have got referrals to 3 different places and got the job. I think I was forced to. It goes super, you need a job, you're moving here. Like go really wide, have all these conversations. You're going to need the 8 on-sites to hopefully convert 1 to a job because you're sleeping on your brother's couch. And again, like in hindsight, it seems like a smart thing that I'll, share here. But yeah, it was honestly just like, how am I just going to get a job just to start out here?
And Ross, like, talk to us about I'm really like interested in working at Columbia, like working in the record industry and just really understanding like what was your role there and like working with these artists. Like, was there a lot of networking? Was there a lot of hand-to-hand combat? Did you get your taste into some SaaS tools that you were like, man, this is awesome, or man, this really sucks to work with, like actually building out these campaigns? I'd love to just learn more about that.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked about SaaS and tooling and stuff like that, man. We were on, I don't know what version of Microsoft that must have been from like 20 years ago. I honestly, like pre-internet days, we used Citrix for the it was wild. No, so definitely didn't learn a lot about technology from there. I think I learned a lot of how to deal with difficult people, not necessarily the artists themselves, but we were kind of like, so my job was honestly like project management. How do you collaborate with the teams internally across, radio promo, digital marketing, production, et cetera. And then on the artist side, it was more their management team, booking, et cetera. So it was like juggling each of my bosses used to have their own like point person that would do this coordination. And each of them used to have like half as many artists. But obviously with the contraction of the music industry in the last, 20, 30 years, they shared someone and they each had twice as many artists. So it was every day. There was no way I felt like I couldn't do a good job every day. And it was about prioritization. How can I fuck up the least during my day and during my week? I'd turn on the lights every day. I'd be the last one out. And there's no way I could do a good job. And I think that taught me a lot about what I think the best sellers do, which is like perseverance, working through really challenging situations, prioritization, time management, and dealing with personalities. So I try to look on the bright side of things. That's definitely what I learned. So yeah, it's an interesting gig.
Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing today. Of course, we want to spend a good amount of time on just the Accord tool. But I'd love to hear sort of the origin story behind it. How did what you were doing? I'm making some assumptions here that you came up with the idea maybe as an enterprise account executive at Stripe based on things that you learned selling there. But yeah, correct me where I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the general gist of it. So I started selling, didn't have, unfortunately didn't go to one of these amazing programs like a Xerox or SAP where they have this,
Right.
3-month sit in the classroom, learn about sales, and just kind of started hitting the phones and was lucky enough to have like incredible, everyone wanted to talk to Stripe, whether you reached out to them or they reached out inbound, and got a lot of repetitions and kind of figured out my way of selling. But it really wasn't until we started getting trainers and more structure, like bringing in frameworks like Medic, bringing in incredible trainers like Skip Miller, where I was like, wait, there's a way to do this thing. Like you don't just make up stuff. Like there's holy shit. And I read all the books, but they weren't like prescriptive frameworks, right? It wasn't really specific. Yeah. So coming in, I was like, what? And then you try the thing and it works. And you're like, what's going on? Like there's a way, guys, why are we doing all this crazy stuff and making up and doing different stuff? Like there's literally words that you can say in a certain order that will lead to an outcome that we can make way more money. And that to me was like really the first part of like, there's so much more process that even in enterprise sales where everything's a special snowflake and you have different dynamics in the people stuff, there's a way of doing things. And that's what really got me started. And honestly, I was really against that stuff when I started in sales. I was like, a script? No, we're not an outbound BDR team. We need to do a script. I'm smarter than that. I can do this. And honestly, leaning into the process stuff, I think really accelerated my career and effectiveness in sales. And the one thing I'll never forget is my largest deal when I got promoted from more of the commercial segment to enterprise. It was one of my largest deals, and I built this kind of collaborative plan with the CFO that was engaging, and the COO somehow got this shot. They're making a decision to potentially turn off their existing payment processor in like 2 weeks, and we had to like do the whole 3-month, 6-month sales cycle in like 2 weeks because we had an opening. And we built out this plan with them, and they got in there and started putting everything in this Google Doc and sheet that I had like come with my point of view on and worked with my management team at my boss at Stripe at. And that was like, wait, we can put stuff together, like work on it together instead of me coming with the final thing. And the only reason I did that is because we had this compressed timeline that I even asked for their input. And that to me was kind of the birth of Accord, was like, there's a process and structure, but it also requires the collaboration and partnership with the folks on the other side. And from then on, kind of built out this motion, a bunch of different templated docs and sheets and shared Slack channel stuff and email templates, which became the birth of Accord, this kind of value selling platform for folks that really understand that. It's about partnering with your customers to get to the ideal outcome on a deal.
Yeah. So I can think back, it was a few years ago that I saw my first mutual action plan, basically. And the concept is so abstract if no one shows it to you. Because I think when you go into sales, especially if you start in SMB or mid-market sales, it's so foreign because the focus is always just on, let's get them closed on the first or second call or the third call. Let's send them the paperwork. Let's do what we got to do. Just get it done. And for a huge chunk of my career, that's all it was. It was, hey, we have a couple calls. We send over the link. They can sign up. Here's the order form, et cetera. And you're not thinking like that. There's multiple stakeholders. There's multiple parties that have to sign off on something. There's complexity, whether it's legal, IT complexity, compliance complexity. Like there's just so much that goes into doing an enterprise deal. So I remember the first time that I had to encounter one, or I had to actually roll one out, is I was actually commiserating with a peer of mine. And I was like, I don't get it. I'm having these calls, and then it's like this awkward, like, okay, did you want to buy, and like, it's really hard to get past a certain point in an enterprise deal without a plan. And you can't just be like, okay, now what? You have to have those next steps really well baked out, well in advance. And you as the seller have to actually have you have to posture yourself as, typically what I do in my process with my clients, Ross, is I bring them through this and this and this, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. And I know that there's going to be work to do on your side to get the approvals and the legal sign off and the compliance. And we know that there's going to be a new vendor checklist that we have to go through. And we know that we're going to have to do a call where we present this. So the first time I ever did that, I was so confused, because I'm like, I don't really know what to do next. Like, I feel like this person likes me and I feel like they would buy from us and they like our product. So what now? And so this peer was like, well, do you have a mutual action plan? And I was like, I don't know what that is. Walk me through that. And they're like, well, when are they going to go live? And I was like, I don't know, like whenever we can sell them. And he was like, no. He's like, you're new to this. You got to figure out, like, what's the end game? Like, what's their go live date? And then you need to work back milestone by milestone to where you are today. And you have to drive them through those milestones. You can't just like leave it up to chance. You can't leave it up to like personality or whatever, just closing chops. Like, it's a project. You are a project manager now. And if you want to actually win this deal, you've got to put a plan in place. And so that was where I got introduced. He had a template that he shared with me. Later, I kind of built on that. And I want to share that when I saw what Accord's building, it was like, oh man, I've been doing this for years out of like spreadsheets and out of Word docs. And it's not the most effective way to do it, because it's never really fully collaborative that way, because you're just trusting that your prospects are carrying out their version of the milestones on their side, but you have really no way to track that, or you have no way to account for that fully. So you have to do a lot of guesswork in there. I think it's really cool. And yeah, obviously, if you can't tell, I could rant on and drone on about mutual action plans for hours upon hours, because I've now done probably dozens of them at this point. And it's my favorite thing to do is when you finally get into that mutual action plan groove and you realize, like, there's a real deal here. We just need to follow the steps and get it done.
Totally. Yeah, I think when I always think about the word that's kind of top of mind the last year or so with kind of the headwinds in SaaS and in sales is conviction. I think customers are willing to take a bet and champions are willing to work with you if you have conviction around not just the value that your product provides, but that you're going to take them from today to success. And they're really trusting you. And I think that having a game plan, not just the plan, but telling them the stakeholders, who's going to be involved on both sides. These are the milestones. This is how long each thing takes. This is the risks and of each of them. And then making sure you have a really strong point of view and the why behind the deal. And all of those put together equals, what every A+ player does, whether they know it or they not, whether they know it or don't. And again, I think, kind of tying this to Accord is, honestly, those top sellers out there and you're roughly going to be as successful today using your sheets and docs and stuff as Accord. That's not really the value prop. The value is, how do you get what's in your mind to the rest of the sellers on your team? How do you, the classic, like, oh, Thursday lunch and learn with Jesse, tell us about this deal that you won. And you're like trying to like convey all this stuff, or like, hey, let's do the force management, rollout, and this is our positioning. It's like, yeah, great. We all think about that in a couple of days and it goes away. But how do you build a high performance team? How do you share, how is your colleague that tried this thing going to share that with the best practice template? And that's really what we're all about, is how do you drive a high performance team, have the Jessies of the world and the Chases of the world, adding back to that every quarter and every month, and holding ourselves to a really high standard of execution, because deals are getting done these days. Just if you do all of the right stuff. And I don't think that there's kind of that, it feels like an exception versus the standard for doing the things that we're talking about, which blows my mind, because we're all, at least roughly half our pay is coming from doing deals. And if there's better stuff to do, why wouldn't we be doing that?
My story is kind of case in point on that, because in this role where I was finally introduced to a mutual action plan, I think I'd been in the role for 9 months and there was no standard process.
Game changer.
No one in my first 90 days was like, hey, here at this company, this is how you're going to do your 6-figure deals. It was just like, luckily I was more venting than anything to this peer. And he was like, oh, what's your mutual action plan? And I was like, what's that? So.
Well, and something that really, I call myself a recovering entrepreneur turned SaaS sales executive, and moving from the space that I was in, I used to own a valet company. So we did like very high end private events. Like we did a Jerry Breckheimer wedding, and it was like we were bringing people from Louisville, Kentucky to this like farm that was 100 miles away. We were moving like 500 people. We had to hire like 50 Sprinter vans. It's like these type of deals don't just happen like a week in advance. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of logistics. And like I was already doing mutual action plans with a fucking valet company. And also if you take a look at like where you go out to eat, it's like franchise modeling of restaurants. It's like they have a standard process, and it makes it so if you go to a certain restaurant, you have that same experience. And I think that a lot of SaaS companies don't understand they do have a brand experience that can be had with the sales process. And I think that that's really what you're going for, is like, you know, getting that like Ross of that process of like, this is what it feels like to go through Stripe. This is what it feels like to be sold by Salesforce. This is what happens.
Yeah, because how much of your product, how much of the value that you're providing in SaaS, especially more complex solutions, is the customer touching during a year and a half sales process? Even if you're doing a POC, they're touching what, less than 10%, 5% of your product? You're selling how you sell is what you're selling. And people also make emotional decisions and they rationalize it. So it's all about, how you show up. I always, when I talk about this stuff to dumb it down, especially, when I'm trying to translate this to, my family and friends who aren't in SaaS sales, it's like that incredible high-end restaurant experience where you sit down, you might not know the menu, all this stuff, and you have this incredible waiter or waitress who just walks you through, hey, what do you like? I'm going to tell you this is the best stuff. You make fewer decisions and you're happier at the end of it because of that process. And that's always, to kind of dumb it down, I always think about, enterprise or, upper mid-market sales is you want someone on the other end who's just like undoubtedly going to help you look great in front of your peers and bring you through this process. And that's how you get a champion to make those intros and connections and bang on the table to get deals done in 2024.
Yeah.
Ross, what kind of data were you sharing with like your investors when you were actually raising like your seed level? Like what were investors really looking at? And like, what were you able to say like, hey, before people used Accord, we were able to show X? Like I don't know if you can share any of that information, but that's stuff that I would like to just learn. Like, what are these investors looking for?
Totally. Well, maybe I'll start with kind of the early days and then, later. So early days, it was more of you're selling yourself as like the founder market fit, and you're selling the concept of something that is and isn't very obvious. Like, is it obvious in terms of like there could be a big market that solves a problem that a lot of companies and people would have, but not obvious as in like, if so, it would have already been solved. It was a super low moat for someone else to be able to compete. So at the beginning, it was just like, oh, wow, you've been this top seller, entrepreneurial background, the way that you did it, and everyone else has a Google Doc and a sheet in this thing that they're replicating, but it's like the top folks. So if you could democratize that, cool, we get the value that you can provide. So that was kind of the seed round. The Series A was very different, especially 14 months ago when we did the round in a very tough SaaS economy.
Yeah.
Only investors were doing, typically people that would do, 6, 8 Series A's a year had done 0 or 1. So the bar was very high. The metrics that they needed were like much later stage equivalents. And I think the thing that hearing the results from our customers in terms of, again, not just that top rep of like, hey, I've always been successful. This, Ross built the thing that he wanted for himself and that, all these other top reps want. It was hearing from that kind of, B player that wanted to learn more, or that frontline manager was trying to elevate their team and was like, this was a concrete way that I could help the rest of the team understand what great looked like. And I could orient people around something tangible instead of fields in Salesforce or stage names or 60-page sales playbooks. And this is the stuff you need to do with a customer. And honestly, in retrospect, it's really, we try to hold our reps accountable to the activities and things we say, but what holds you more accountable than anything is the customer. So the fact that you're sharing this stuff with them and you're building it with them has such a higher bar for how you're going to show up. And I think that's what really got people's eyes to open, is like, wow, there's all this, there's the Gongs and Clarys and Salesforces and Outreaches and Sales Lofts. what are you actually working on with the customer during a deal? You're not using any of those tools to move a deal from evaluation to validation, or do the validation stage or onboarding. It's a spreadsheet, a doc, Zoom, in-person stuff. And the idea that you could build artifacts that what your top sellers are doing and replicate that, that's kind of, I think, what people are like, oh, there might be some white space in this insanely crowded go-to-market tech market that seems to be, making an acquisition every day and kind of building the same stuff. So yeah, hopefully that kind of helps answer that question, Chase.
Yeah. Is the category you're in, is it deal execution, or is there a name for the category you're in, or is it a whole new category?
Oh man, category creation. I was down that rabbit hole a lot at the beginning. You're like, want to be this like sexy new company. Let's come up with the name. Let's read, what are all those books?
Play Bigger is one of them.
Play Bigger is a great one that we got really into. What's our lightning strike? What's this thing? Yeah, honestly, in retrospect, you want to figure out how to align yourself to like either an existing category or as close to, and lean into like, this is how we're slightly different. I think when money was free and you could raise a $30-40 million Series A on like 500K of ARR, I think it made sense to spend a ton of money on marketing and creating your own name. Honestly, if you put yourself in the customer's shoes, it's just confusing to these enablement people and ops people who are looking for ways to drive productivity. And I think we kind of moved away from like, what's the sexy new way that we can call ourselves, the customer collaboration platform, to like, the stuff that you're trying to get your team to do today. How you're trying to get your team to, build business value cases or multi-thread more, have exec engagement, this stuff, or, bringing this training that doesn't stick. We're your reinforcement tool for your strategy. You're smarter than us. Yeah. You have the right strategy. Your reps, handful of reps are successful. We help copy paste what they're doing successfully to build a repeatable sales motion. So yeah, usually like, a sales execution or deal execution platform is kind of what we call ourselves, but we're kind of like, call us whatever you want. Those things that you do, that top reps do, that you're trying to get everyone else to do, we help you set that as a standard and create accountability around it. So yeah, that's what's awesome. I think really helps click. Yeah.
And Ross, could you just tell me like, who is the Michelin star of like SaaS selling? Like where should the bar be set for like, hey, we should aspire to be this company, or like, obviously,
that's a good question.
You brought up in the very beginning, like Xerox and these other companies that have like these legacy sales trainings, but just in the SaaS space, like I'm trying to understand like who is the McDonald's, or not even Michelin type star restaurant that just has these processes bulletproof. That's like, I want to work at this place and it'll be a game changer for my career.
That's a great question. Honestly, so much of it comes down to that CRO and the lieutenant VP of RevOps who operationalizes their vision of what excellent looks like. And you'd be surprised where some of the companies with the best products that don't necessarily need the best sales motion have it, because I think they're able to recruit those incredible leaders. And some of the people that need it the most, that can't just, don't have the best product in the world, I think sometimes slack. So for example, Figma, one of our early customers and partners, honestly went bottoms up with a handful of the reps and frontline leaders to being able to roll it out globally. They have such a strong sales leadership team, and they're the last people that needed a core. They had the best product in the market. They built this thing for 6 years in stealth, came and just eviscerated every other player in that market. Envision went out of business from being a multi-$100 million ARR company. And they were pure, designer first, bottoms up, decided to sell to the C-suite and executives, and decided that we're going to be a really strong sales team, not just product led, and did an incredible job from the CRO down to the frontline managers. Probably the best, most talented folks that I've seen. Wow. Which is shocking, because I'm like, if Figma's doing this, and they went from zero to, $500 million in ARR in a few years and had this $20 million Adobe offer and all this stuff. Like, what are you doing? How are you not doing? They brought in Force. They do, everyone get together twice a year, like double SKO, to be like really meticulous about their messaging and positioning, reviews, training for the team, managers, all this stuff. And I'm like, they're doing this stuff and they're crushing it, the best product in the market. How are some of these other companies feel like they don't need to be that rigorous and they can rest on their laurels? So super inspired to see them do that. Yeah.
And does like talk to me about, so in my current role at Hyros, I mean, it is the deal velocity here is fucking crazy. I mean, Alex Becker, our founder, is like, we're getting demos left and right. And so talk to me about at Stripe how you as an IC just dealt with just crazy inbounds and really optimizing your time as an IC and really starting to level up your time commitment and really where to put your focus as a seller.
I mean, yeah, then thank the sales gods every day that that's the case if that's you, because it's not as many AEs or SDRs that are in that position. But yeah, I mean, early days we were. It was like every, you know, entrepreneur with like one or two people, and you had to sift through like how you're going to make your quota and not spend a ton of. And the people that want to spend the most time with you are typically the most unqualified in that SMB space, especially, or startup space. I got my demos and calls down to like, instead of a 30-minute block, like 10 or 15. I tried to be super upfront with them, and the best companies loved it when you qualified them, because they're like, no, we are a fit for this. And how can you be upfront and say, hey, we work with companies that are working on this thing, at least this, blah, blah, blah. If they don't have this, we can't help them because we're just technology, right? All of us are selling technology, not a strategy. So I think making sure they're at the right stage to work with you gets the right folks to lean in and brings the folks that probably are qualified maybe in 3 months, 6 months back in a way that, that you're the first person that they call. That's how I thought about dealing with that crazy volume, is like, earning the right to gain their trust to make that decision of, hey, this is just being super prescriptive. I think that's, kind of that conviction of who you work with, how you help, and being really prescriptive is what I see the best sellers do, even in the SMB space.
Yeah. That's y'all have been in luxury spots, because most of my career it's been, oh, you want a deal? You got to go like call someone cold and convince them to take a first meeting, and I'm still in a role like that. So someday I'm gonna I don't know, either build or join a company that has just leads raining.
Let's talk about that though, because that's I think that's kind of what I hear from most people today. Even if you are in those big companies that were successful, I think it's gotten to a point where it's harder to close. They're splitting up territories to drive rep productivity, and you do need to kind of create luck in a lot of ways. And so happy to
I mean, Ross, like I would say, like in my role, like I'm very unique in the way that I sell. It's like I'm if somebody says like, hey Chase, I'm on this call and I need a media buyer, it's like, maybe we're not media buyers at Hyros, but I'll say I have 10 different agencies that I can make warm intros to, and I'll just go above and beyond and make that intro. And that in itself, even if they don't buy Hyros, it just brings more validation. And then that person, when they're ready, they'll come back. And it's like, I'm just trying to always prove value. And it's like, I think so many people are just being feature preachers and just really care about their product so much. And it's like, really, a lot of these people they're in a lot of pain and they need help, but they don't know who to go to. And I just think your tool is awesome. And I wish more salespeople would take put the human in sales approach. And it's like, don't just try to put your features down somebody's throat, but actually understand what are they dealing with? How can you bring value, and use that process of, okay, this is what we can do. And then here are the other pieces that we can help put in place as well.
Totally. And that's why I love what you guys are doing, is like, I think that there's so much of a focus on the technology in SaaS sales versus the kind of art and respect of sellers. And people don't see themselves as this like elevated profession. It's almost seen as like this, like, slimy thing. Oh, it's about the engineers, about product. It's like, none of that works without figuring out how to distribute it. And most companies can't be self-serve bottoms up. I'm sorry. Everyone wants to be that, that 0.1% company that we talk about. It's not the average. The average is, slinging deals and having people at the front lines, like you said, Chase, helping people, making connections, helping with them, fill that next role on their team, or, making some recommendation about how they're doing something else because you're that expert. And I just don't think that's the way we talk about being an AE today, and why everyone wants to be the CRO. No one wants to be that lifetime AE, even though if you're great at that job, you can make far more consistently than anyone else, because it's not seen, I think, as like a respected profession, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're changing that on this show. I'm changing. I don't know.
You guys are.
I'm
You guys are.
I'm
For
like,
sure.
I'm making more money than I ever have in my
Yeah.
life, and I don't care,
It's already come a long way. I remember a few years ago, this is a fun story, that I was at a, pretty sizable Silicon Valley high growth company, and we had this batch of new recruits that were fresh out of school, and we had a woman join from one of the Ivy Leagues, and I was actually pretty surprised that she left one of the Ivy Leagues to come be an SDR. And for context, like, I kind of fell into this space. I didn't really know what else to do with myself in my journalism degree from a state school. And so I kind of like worked my way into sales. And so it was just like, it blew my mind to have someone say, hey, I think it was Cornell. I came from Cornell to be an SDR. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, this is like the new iBanking or the new consulting. Like, people are now starting to talk about tech sales as like a new, career path from the Ivy League universities. And there's, great earning potential and a lot of really cool, fun, engaging work and those sorts of things. So anyway, that really blew my mind. Cause again, I think for so many years, so many decades, it was like, well, sales is like the last resort job that you take because you're an English major or something and you just needed some place to land. And so you started selling something. So pretty crazy. And I hope it continues in that direction. Like, I hope people continue to explore the career path, because it really is fun, especially when you get into the type of selling that we're talking about, where you get to use something like Accord and build out a plan with buyers. Those buyers in a lot of cases are executives. They're leaders of IT orgs. They're, legal experts. They're procurement experts. There's so many different stakeholders. And it's actually really cool when selling stops being about hard closing or, calling somebody during dinner time or knocking on their door or anything like that. And it starts to become like this project management where it's, hey, I get to orchestrate multiple moving parts, both internally on my side and externally on the prospect side. And I get to be the star of the show. I'm the project manager. I get to outline, what the steps are, how we execute on them, what time we need, time frames for doing so. And, all the while I get to keep telling this story, a consistent story of, at the end of this journey, things are going to get better for your team because you're going to have new technology. You're going to move faster. You're probably going to save some money, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just, it gets fun. I tell that to a lot of people because I've talked to a lot of young folks in their career, and, they're sitting in an SDR seat and they make 100 phone calls a day and they're sending thousands of emails a week. And they're like, when does this get fun? And I'm like, it does get fun. It really does. But you got to hang in there. And, part of it is, of course, like the company you join, and there's territory and timing and all those things that have to fall into place. But if you stay the course, eventually you'll get to a point where you get to do more strategic deals, or you get to be in a role where you have like so many inbounds, you don't even know what to do with it. And you have to, the game is then learning how to optimize your inbounds for which ones are going to close the fastest. Both are really fun games to play. And that's when this profession gets super awesome.
Totally.
Yeah, the gamification, that's what I love about SaaS. It's like a game, I feel like. And Ross, let me ask you this, like, does Accord help with onboarding? And like, what happens? Like, okay, they sign the deal, the payments on the way, but it's sort of during the pilot part of the project of they haven't paid the big money yet. Does Accord help with that?
It's a great question. Honestly, I never thought about that being a separate stage because the companies I sold that were consumption based. So I don't get paid as a seller until you kind of go through three sales processes. You go through the deal, like the term sheet, like what are we going to roughly pay? Then we have to technically integrate or onboard in some way. Then we need to ramp our usage with specific use cases after the technical stakeholders and the end users. So I always thought about my deal is like, hey, I need to incorporate stage 2 and stage 3 of that, the onboarding and the rollout, to my sales process. Because if I close them, I'm going to have a ton of these deals. This is what happens. You're going to have a ton of deals stuck in onboarding because they don't have the right technical stakeholders bought in during the sales process. So maybe the right business stakeholders said yes, but you don't have the technical folks to actually do the onboarding, and you might not have the right operational folks to then launch. So that just kind of became part of figuring out sales. But I think in a lot of SaaS sales, they have these really decoupled teams, right? They might have the seller, the PS and onboarding team, and a totally separate account management and success team, which I think does a disservice to both the seller and the customer, because I think learning about what goes wrong and what goes right for onboarding is so helpful during the sales process and a massive differentiator. if you can be, even from a personal perspective, not even the product, of like, hey, I'm going to help you overcome these things. It gives you so many more levers to support the customer and be a better partner as an individual that needs to close quota if I understand the onboarding and the rollout stuff. So I always thought about that as my responsibility of delivering the promise of what I was pitching, regardless of the compensation structure. And that's kind of how we think about it with Accord, is like, you need to take a customer from, where they are today with your product, deliver success. That's it. It has nothing to do with these 3 different stages that have different companies, there's different roles. Like, as an AE, I think your job is to deliver on the promise that you share with them. And whether you have like counterparts that are doing the work, you should still be that quarterback or that project manager throughout the entire process, and kind of set up the mutual plan based on like, your champion getting a promotion should be the final thing in that mutual action plan and business case.
Yeah. Something that I think our listeners will be really interested in, Ross, is once you funded the business, how did you go about getting your first customers and the first round of teams that were bought into this vision that you have, which is creating this excellence across the sales process, but then also enabling the teams with these tools that they can then go out and, tactically manage these deals?
Yeah, it's a super common question that I get. And I wish I had been told this earlier, but people your first 10 customers aren't going to buy you for your product. You think about the tools that we use every day. You think about 3 or 4 tools that I use most commonly. I use, my iPhone here. I use, my MacBook. I'm using Zoom. These products have been developed for over a freaking decade. Yeah. They're not going to use your product because they're better than the average thing that you're working on today when you built something in 3, 6 months, a year, even 18 months with a small team. They're going to buy you and use you because they fit into that, adoption curve. They're the innovators and early adopters. They are passionate about the problem space that you're solving and want to be a part of that. And I think I would have taken such a different approach of the marketing, sales, and success motion of, you really should think about them as your product advisory board. Even if they're paying your first customers for that first, let's call it 2 years, you're co-developing this thing with, and they're willing to go out and get some money from their company to be part of that thing, that extracurricular. And it's going to move their career forward because they end up being a close partner. They change companies and bring you in there. I didn't get that. And I think in retrospect, I wouldn't buy a thing to buy the thing to have the impact of my company. I'd buy it to be their champion and their helper because I'm excited about the problem space and excited about the stuff we're talking about today. So I think it really helps you better qualify folks that are going to work with you and probably spend a lot more time with the right people and a lot less time with the wrong folks. So, yeah.
So to get those first people talking to you to be that partner in the, the development and the build out, right? Was it mostly from your own network of selling or your investor networks? How did you go about getting sort of the first round of conversations, and how many conversations do you tend to recommend as someone who's founding a company should you have to really validate that you're onto something? Because I'm sure in the early days, it's like, well, do people really want this? And is this a big, I think you mentioned it earlier, like the top AEs are doing this, but is this something that the masses can handle, right?
And you need to understand both though, right? And you can't get too narrow.
Yeah.
So I think I'd reframe, like the classic, like, okay, talk to 50 people, 100 people. I have those goals for myself. It never stops. I think the times where business has moved the slowest is when I'm spending the least amount of time on the front lines. And the times of business move the fastest is when I spend the most time possible with prospects, customers, whoever, and just are out there. I think that's the job of the CEO, is bringing the energy and bringing in the interest and excitement and passion for what you're building. I think building in public was incredibly helpful for us, and leveraging the places that not necessarily your long-term ICP is, but those innovators and early adopters are. So, LinkedIn sales communities, if you're in go-to-market, or, Product Hunt, if it's more product engineering centric, Hacker News, like meetups in person, like go to places where that stage of buyer or person is going to be at, and just share as good as possible, sharing what you're working on verbally with whoever. Maybe it's a family friend. Maybe it's, your uncle's friend at a dinner party who has a niece who's in this, like, you just never know where these opportunities are going to come from. And people can sense that passion and energy, and they'll come back to you. So when I think about, how we got our first customers and the things that were needle movers, we're just, you never know where it's going to come from. It's just about doing it day in and day out and, getting lucky.
in creating that personal brand. I think that you've done a really great job at that, Ross. And I see you popping on LinkedIn. You have a podcast where you're interviewing sales leaders. And as we come to a close today, like, really would like you to just share, like, who is your ideal customer for Accord? How can people get in touch with you if they have like investment questions or just to talk to the Accord team? And then also about your just sales team right now at Accord.
Yeah, I mean, I again try to spend as much time as possible with folks on the field, whether you're that passionate top rep, that incredible frontline leader, or CRO. No one's too big or too small. I think it's really important to be authentic and be genuinely curious about, everyone from the decision maker of a, $1 million deal or the end user at your smallest customer. So anyone just, genuinely passionate about, sales as an incredible profession and execution excellence. Our ideal customer has a more complex sales motion. It's not a one or two call close. It's somewhere where you're really building strong partnerships with your customer through the sales or onboarding post sales motion. So yeah, the more complex, the number of decision makers, all that good stuff. And yeah, we love partnering with people that have a strong point of view around how they should be selling, and they're looking for a way to really enforce that and drive that standard of excellence in the field. So, but guys, this was an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
Clearly we share a lot of, strong feelings around the profession of sales and, and how, fun it is. I love the fact that it's a meritocracy and you can really kind of build as big, you can be doing $100 million M&A deals, which is basically enterprise sales or transactional deals, whatever you love. But no, this was super fun.
Yeah, Ross, thanks so much. I took away a bunch of stuff. There was some gold in, just your advice around finding the right company. Love your perspective on the industry and where it's going. And of course, we know you have the scars to prove it all. Like, I'm sure you've been on that journey as an AE yourself. And I think that really lends a lot of authenticity to Accord's brand. So thanks for coming on and sharing. And it sounds like our fans can connect with you on LinkedIn, or is there another platform that you're more active on?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Just search Ross Rich Accord, and our website's inaccord.com. Yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks again. This was awesome.
Yeah, take it easy, guys.
See ya.
If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSURF5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSURF5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf.